Most people think the moment you hear the word cancer, everything suddenly becomes loud. Doctors talking, machines beeping, family asking questions. But for me, it was the opposite. Everything became very quiet. I remember sitting in that small office, staring at a stain on the carpet near the doctor's desk. Brown spot, probably coffee. I kept looking at it while he was talking. Stage 3. Aggressive. Treatment options, time frames, words like that. But my mind didn't really stay in that room. It drifted somewhere else, somewhere far behind me. My name is Robert Hale. I'm 82 years old. And until a few months ago, I thought I understood how my life had unfolded. Turns out, I had been misunderstanding it for a very long time. I was born in a small town where people didn't talk much about feelings. You worked, you kept your promises, and you didn't complain about things that couldn't be fixed. My father woke up before sunrise every morning, same coffee cup, same chair, same silence. I became that man without ever noticing. At 19, I started working at the local manufacturing plant. It was supposed to be temporary, just a year or two. Then life did what life does. It quietly stacked years on top of each other. At 24, I married Eleanor. She had this way of laughing that made people in other rooms turn their heads. Not loud, just warm, like she carried sunlight in her chest. We rented a small apartment with thin walls and a kitchen window that looked out over the parking lot. I remember one night, our first winter there. The heater was broken. We sat on the floor eating canned soup with blankets around our shoulders. Eleanor kept pretending we were camping. She said, "When we're old, we'll laugh about this." I didn't laugh. I was already thinking about overtime shifts, bills, the future. Funny thing about the future, it keeps arriving while you're busy preparing for it. 30 years passed inside that factory. The sounds of metal presses and conveyor belts became the background music of my life. Every morning the same routine: coffee, car keys, drive, punch in, work, punch out. Dinner, sleep, repeat. There were moments, small ones, that tried to interrupt that rhythm. Our son taking his first steps across the living room carpet. Eleanor waiting by the window when I came home late. A fishing trip that I promised and postponed 3 summers in a row. I noticed those moments, but only briefly. Like someone glancing at scenery through a train window, always moving, always somewhere else in my head. By the time I turned 50, the world had started changing faster than I could keep up with. The factory introduced computers. Half the men I worked with got laid off within a few years. I stayed, not because I was smarter, just because I had been there longer. Loyalty counted for something back then, or maybe it just delayed the inevitable. Eleanor started leaving notes for me on the kitchen counter, little things. "Milk is low. Your sister called. Don't forget your coat." Sometimes she wrote something different. "I miss sitting with you." I would read those notes in the morning while standing by the sink. Then I'd fold them and slide them into my pocket, like they were receipts I'd deal with later. Later is a strange word. It feels big and open. But most of the time, later simply disappears. I remember the night my son left for college. Eleanor cried in the driveway after we helped him pack the car. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, staring at the empty space where his car had been. She asked me something that night. I still hear it sometimes when the house gets quiet. She said, "Robert, when do we start living the part we kept postponing?" I didn't have an answer. So I did what I always did. I went to work the next morning. Years continued stacking up the way they always had, quietly, without asking permission. The factory eventually closed when I was 63. I remember standing outside the gates on the last day with a cardboard box under my arm. Inside it were a few tools, a coffee mug, and a photograph Eleanor had given me years earlier. I thought retirement would feel like freedom. but it mostly felt like standing in a room where the furniture had been removed. Too much space, too much silence. Eleanor handled it better than I did. She started gardening more, taking long walks in the evening. Sometimes she would sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the sky change colors. She always invited me to sit with her. Sometimes I did. Most nights I said I'd join her in a minute. Minutes have a strange habit of becoming years. Then one winter morning, Eleanor didn't wake up. The doctor later called it heart failure. Quick, peaceful, words like that, but the house didn't feel peaceful afterward. It felt unfinished, like a conversation that ended halfway through a sentence. I spent the next decade moving through days without much shape to them. Coffee, newspaper, a walk around the block, television humming in the background. My son visited when he could. He had his own life now, a different city, a family of his own. That's the way it's supposed to go. Children move forward. Old men stay behind with their memories. Then, 3 months ago, I went to the doctor because I'd been feeling tired. Just tired. At 82, being tired doesn't seem unusual. They ran a few tests, more tests after that. And then came that quiet office with the stain on the carpet. Cancer. I walked out of the hospital that afternoon into bright sunlight. Cars moving, people talking on their phones, a woman laughing somewhere across the street. The world didn't stop, it rarely does. I drove home slowly, parked in the driveway. Sat there for a long time with the engine off. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, blue shutters Eleanor picked out 20 years ago. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in my life, the future stopped pretending to be endless. It had edges now, clear ones. That night I opened a drawer in the bedroom. Inside were the notes Eleanor used to leave me. I had kept them all, folded pieces of paper, yellowed at the corners. I sat on the edge of the bed reading them one by one. Don't forget your coat. Your sister called. I miss sitting with you. That last one stayed in my hand for a long time. I realized something then, something that had been sitting quietly in my life for decades. I had spent most of my years preparing for a life that was already happening. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for the calm season, waiting for later. And while I was waiting, Eleanor had been living the days we actually had. When the doctor asked me about treatment options the next week, I listened carefully. Chemotherapy, radiation, hospitals, timelines measured in months and percentages. I thanked him for explaining everything. Then I told him the decision I had made. It surprised him. Maybe it surprised me too. But for the first time in a very long time, the choice felt honest. I told him I wasn't going to spend whatever time I had left inside hospital rooms. I didn't say it with anger or bravery, just quiet certainty. The truth is, I had already spent decades postponing life. I didn't want to postpone the ending too. These days I wake up early. Earlier than I ever did when I worked at the factory. The house is still quiet in the mornings, but it doesn't feel empty anymore. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, the way Eleanor used to. The sky changes colors slowly. Birds move across the trees. Small things I barely noticed before. I talk to her sometimes, not out loud, just in my head. Mostly I tell her I'm sorry I kept saying in a minute. I don't know exactly how much time I have left. Doctors can guess. But guessing has never been very reliable. What I do know is this: when the future becomes smaller, the present becomes louder. Every creaking floorboard, every breeze through the trees, every memory that finally decides to speak. If you're listening to this, maybe it's because something in the title caught your attention. Or maybe you just stayed long enough to hear an old man finish a story. Either way, thank you for sitting here with me for a little while. Sometimes it helps, just knowing someone is listening.